So I wanted to talk about my relationship with my local authority. So at the moment, it's not a very good one, and it hasn't been good for the past 4.5 years, 4.5 years. I've been harassed, I've been bullied, and I'm not getting the right care for my son. They're not listening to me. I've been trying to adhere to all the Mental Capacity Act legislations to support my son, sharing information with local authorities, social workers, etc. It's not happening. They're not listening to me. I even discussed my son's health and well-being. I actually had to hire a solicitor to sort his support plan out, because they were actually missing out important information about his health and well-being. And so when I included that, then the social workers just completely ignored that. When I wanted my son to have a continuing care health plan referral done, they completely avoided it. They didn't go ahead with it. They didn't take any information that I told them on board. So then when they eventually found a respite service after years, recently, and my son started to access it in May. And then that respite service, I kept writing to social services requesting that they write back to me to explain whether or not this service could meet my son's health needs, because he's got complex health needs. And instead of writing back to me, they didn't respond. They didn't tell me anything. And then I asked them, is this a self-contained, or one other person property? Again, they didn't put anything about the placement in writing. And under the Mental Health Capacity Act law, a local authority is abided by those guidelines that they have to follow, that they have to send me the information about any placement, any kind of information in relation to services that my son's going to access. I then break that information down and share it with my son. They didn't do that. They just didn't do that. And what they did is they left it up to me to talk to the provider, the service provider, and that's not how it works. And so when we went there, we were talking to the service provider and we looked around. It looked quite big. And I asked a question like, will Daniel have one other person sharing the house with? And she said, yeah, there's only one other person. And I said, he needs a quiet environment. He can't share it with more than one other person. And she said, yeah, she reassured us. Later on, she changed her tune. She denies she said that. Social worker said the same thing. Initially, he started saying, no, you knew it was a 4-bedroom. You went there, you saw it. I said, no, I didn't. I went there, but I just assumed they were staff bedrooms. I didn't know. You didn't put it in writing. I'm not a service provider. How would I know? And then just making these allegations up and trying to blame me for their mistakes. So then he went on saying things like, oh no, I had to put one of my clients there because he was quite challenging, even though he knew that we were desperate for respite, and it were respite that was happening every fortnight, and they weren't willing to give us that even. And then they interrupted that, and then they identified a service that couldn't even meet Daniel's health needs. Then what ended up happening is that because it wasn't a one other person service, it was a 4-bedroom house. So that meant 3 other clients were going to come in, and that meant that impacted Daniel. And the service manager said, no, it didn't impact Daniel, but it did. He started to experience health issues that they couldn't manage, that social services told us that they could manage. And then the continuing care health referral that I wanted done at the beginning of this year, the social worker didn't do it until the service manager said, oh yeah, he's got complex health needs, we can't deal with it. So that's when the social worker decided to take action, which was in September. Prior to that, he just ignored everything I said, which is almost like a repetitive pattern here, because back in 2018, I told him that my son had transition problems and I couldn't use my mobility vehicle, and his mobility vehicle, because he would find it difficult to get out the vehicle. So that's why I identified a day service that had free transport. But instead of taking on board my concerns and also looking at past history that this has actually happened, they just said, no, 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 you're going to drop him off. You're going to drop him off. Then what that did was that caused my son to refuse to get out the car. That meant me and my daughter didn't have respite. We would sometimes leave him in the car and the day staff would try to get him out, and we would wait outside for hours. We would sometimes wait up to 6 hours. That wasn't respite. Did the local authority take that into account? No, didn't care. They didn't care about the mistakes they made, and they continue to make these mistakes. Then the next mistake they made was my son fell really sick in 2019. He started gaining more and more weight. I was getting more concerned because the psychiatrist wasn't doing any blood tests. Every time I asked her, my son needs a blood test. Every time I asked the GP, the previous GP, my son needs a blood test. They both would say, no, we can't do the blood test. The psychiatrist kept saying, oh, the risks outweigh the benefits. God knows what that means. And then I said to them that it was identified that my son had a fatty liver in 2014 under general anaesthetic for his teeth. And by the way, I had that blood test done. They ignored that. They didn't care. In fact, the GP at the time said, oh, it's nothing to worry about. It's really minor. Nothing to worry about, honestly. It's really normal, in fact. Not thinking that he's on antipsychotics. How are you going to monitor this? I kept saying to them that I have a family with diabetes. Instead of actually acknowledging my concerns, they introduced the community nurse from their team, the multidisciplinary team. She did a home visit and she said, these were the questions she asked me for diabetes. She said, is he drinking a lot? And I said, I don't know really. I said, yeah, probably. Is he urinating much? I said, I can't really tell because he's got bladder issue, he's got toileting problems and stuff. And she said, no, then according to that, he doesn't have diabetes. And I thought, no, this is ridiculous. You can't just measure it on that. She said, no, it's fine. That's the kind of measurements we use. And I thought to myself, this is ludicrous. Then what happened was, that was 2018. Then things were progressively getting worse. The psychiatrist increased his medication. She introduced the benzodiazepine, the clonazepam. His weight ballooned. So it went from 18 stone to 24.5 stone within 7-8 months. And then he started to become more and more aggressive. He pulled out the shower. We didn't have a shower to shower in. We pointed it out to the local authority. They didn't care. They left us without a shower for 11.5 months. They didn't care. I had to get buckets of water from the kitchen because the sensor tap in the bathroom didn't work properly. Did they care? Didn't care at all. Then he smashed up the house. He would beat my daughter up. He'd beat me up. We were getting no support whatsoever. We kept asking social services. We're desperate for help. They gave us nothing. Then in March 2019, the psychiatrist didn't even put a contingency plan. She told me to give Daniel like clonazepam. She didn't say anything about any other medication, what to do in a contingency or in a safeguarding situation. So in March, Daniel had a safeguarding incident where he attacked my daughter while we were dropping him off at the day service. She had a near to well, you could call it a slight concussion because he was hitting her around the head while she was in the back supporting him. And then obviously she couldn't support him when we went to collect him, so I had to contact the day service to ask them to help us. So they agreed. They were great. So so I went to get Daniel, and he was presenting with challenging behaviours. You could see it in the playground. And the carer sat in the back. Daniel didn't want the carer in the car. He kept pushing him, saying, get out, don't want you in here. and he insisted to sit at the front, and it just became really, really dangerous. I could see he was really frustrated. You could see it on his face. Anyway, we managed to get him in the vehicle, and then as we're sitting on the dual carriageway, he starts attacking me. I'm driving and he's in the back seat, and because he's quite a big person, the support worker couldn't control him. He didn't touch the support worker at all. He just went for me. He was pulling my hair, hitting my head against the seat. It was just so, I also had a mild concussion. So the car was stationary on the dual carriageway. I asked the support worker to call the police, because he didn't even think to call the police. So I had to ask him, even though I was the one who was injured. He called the police. Funnily enough, there was a police officer who was following us because he was just off duty and he was driving. And then he helped us while the police came. Paramedics came. Social services were contacted. The police contacted social services and asked them, we've got a young man here. He's just attacked his mum and he attacked his sister in the morning. They went through all the details. The social worker said, section him. And I said, no, don't section him. He's doing this because this is his way of communicating. There's something physically wrong with him. The doctors haven't been listening to me. And they said, sorry, we can't, if that's what social services are saying, we have to follow what they're saying. And I was like, no, he's not doing this deliberately. He's not psychotic. Anyway, thank God there was no spaces in the wards, the mental asylums. And I was pleading with the police. I said, please let him come home. We'll give him extra clonazepam if you ring 111, because the psychiatrist has left no contingency plan. They then brought him back home. They rang 111. We managed to get the extra clonazepam to give to him. That he was calm when he got home anyway. And it was horrific. It was really bad. Following morning, social services contacted me. I thought they were actually going to do something and give us support finally. They didn't do anything. They just came round, pretended they empathised. Nothing. They did nothing for us. They didn't care what happened to us. And then in April, I was expecting them to put some respite in place or nothing. They didn't do anything at all. He stopped going to the day service after that. He just didn't want to go out. Daniel, he completely isolated himself. And then the GP, I changed GPs. I just got sick of that GP. He was complete incompetent, and he was just he just did whatever. He was a nodding dog. Whatever the psychiatrist said, that's what he did. He had no thought pattern of his own. He didn't act in his client's best interest. He didn't say, actually, I've got concerns about the well-being of my patient, and he's got a fatty liver, and we need to get the blood test done. If that means it's under general anaesthetic, so be it. So anyway, what happened was that, Daniel was at home with me. They didn't give us any care or any support. Then in April, one of their managers contacted me. Oh my God. I mean, like I said, I can't swear, but he was a right B. He said things like, you should have been shut down, your son should be sectioned. And then when I tried to raise it with other people in his department, they said, well, it's your word against his. Don't know whether it was true or not. We don't know whether it's true or not. And I knew that he said that in the team. I knew he had an attitude. I knew he influenced the team, and they were all in denial. There was a culture within their team. They even started making allegations that I had some sort of unprofessional relationship with the previous social worker. It was ludicrous. It was so, that after him having that conversation with me, I ended up in A&D. I had to now have an iron infusion, and I was going through anxiety and stress. Did it make any difference when I told the doctors? No, they didn't care, because it was a social worker, and they care about social workers. They don't care about people. So then I went home. I felt insignificant. My son felt insignificant. we as a family a whole felt insignificant. And then what happened was he stopped going out. He just didn't want to go anywhere. And by July, social services said, well, right, he's not going to a day service, we're going to stop this. I said, but he's not well. And I understand why you have to stop it, but please, consider this. No, we're going to have to stop it because he doesn't go. I mean, just imagine if your child's sick and they don't go to school because they're sick. The local authority can't say, okay, we're going to cancel this place because your child's not going. And they knew how difficult it was to access day services, and they still did that to us, knowing full well the family need this support. They didn't care. The social services didn't give a damn. Just like housing adaptations didn't give a damn about anything. The whole team around community care is rubbish in my borough. The Ealing borough is absolutely rubbish when it comes to autism. Even their clinical team, their psychologist, he doesn't know what he's doing. He didn't even know what sensory processing was. They carried out an assessment. The social worker said, oh, are you sure your son's got this condition? I mean, it's ludicrous. It was his team. The clinical team carried it out, and yet there's all these inconsistencies. Social services kept threatening me to take me to court, saying that if you don't agree with us, what we say, or the decisions we make for your son, then we're going to take you to court. We're doing these out of best interest under the Mental Capacity Act. What best interest? If you read his support plan, it didn't even reflect his needs. There was nothing in there about his needs. There was nothing in there about his best interest. There was nothing in there about person-centred, and they had the gall to threaten me. And this was what they were saying, and all I wanted was to support my son. I was worried about his well-being. I was worried about his health, and nobody was listening to me. Not one person, not one professional, not even the current GP. And then in November, that's when I discovered he was really sick. I raised it with the GP. He said, oh no, just keep persevering with the medications, because, I was just following other people's leads and I knew there was something wrong. I contacted 111. The doctor came round, examined him, just did the basic obs, checked his blood pressure, his pulse, said that's all normal, he doesn't have a temperature, everything's fine. I said, no, there's something wrong with my son. I know there's something wrong with my son. And my family has a history of diabetes. I was really concerned that he was overweight. He was 25 stone and he may have developed diabetes. I don't have diabetes, but both my parents did, and my dad had heart issues as well. So I was really concerned about this. So I said, sod this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to contact the GP, get a letter from him. I'm going to see what hospital has a disabled parking near the toilet. I'm going to take all his meds. I'm going to prepare the date, and I'm going to take my son. And I did that. I took him to Charing Cross Hospital. I planned the whole thing. I contacted them, took the letter from the GP, took the diazepam because we needed the diazepam for the blood test. It was being given to him, and for mild sedation. And when we got there, I told the A&D team what was going on. They said, okay, let's do the blood test. Initially, they probably thought it was all rubbish we were saying as well. They didn't believe us either. But then when they took the blood test, that's when they discovered he was going into a ketose coma. They said to me that if you hadn't brought him in, it would have been fatal. And then he was in intensive care for a week. We didn't get any support. Then he was in inpatient endocrinology for a further 2 weeks. I stayed in a hospital with my son for 3 weeks. I didn't have a shower for 3 weeks. Did social services care? No. The social worker came round 3 days before Daniel's discharge, and she said, "Oh, the nurses will look after you. The nurses can't look after somebody who's got autism and challenging behaviour. They're not trained for that." I saw that because I was with him during the night, and there was one incident where he escaped the room and he absconded, and security had to get involved. So I don't know what the social worker was talking about. They didn't help me at all. The doctors in Charing Cross Hospital kept saying, what psychiatrist would put somebody on these medications knowing that they're overweight? Even their psychiatrist was saying this. But they didn't put it in the letter, the discharge letter. Anyway, when he came home, I was so glad I knew what was wrong with him, though. And the doctor sort of had an epiphany with, "Oh yes, Miss Shah, you're right, trying to be nice to me and all this." It's all bullshit. They don't care about me. They don't listen to me. If my son didn't have me, he wouldn't be here today. Did they acknowledge that? No. Did that psychiatrist listen to me when I said I want my son to have... No. So then what I did was I wrote a letter to the head of services. Then she said, okay, I think the best way to go forward is to get an independent investigator involved and Northwest NHS involved to investigate the psychiatrist. Because I put a complaint about her that she refused blood tests, etc. Everything came up as upheld. Everything, basically everything was upheld. My complaint was absolutely useless. So I took it to NHS England. And they also upheld it for the GP. Then I took it to the Parliamentary Ombudsman. And that's when they said, no, you've got a case. But I don't have a leg to stand on because I'm fighting a local authority who are corrupt, who support each other's negligence and malpractice, who don't actually acknowledge the failures of their team and the pain and the suffering they've caused my son. It's scary.